Welcome to the Career Coffee Chat podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Urban, certified career strategist and executive coach, removing career roadblocks so you can achieve more impact, influence, and income. Welcome to Career Coffee Chat Live. I'm your host, Aaron Urban, and I'm an experienced executive coach helping driven, emerging, and evolving leaders like you remove those pesky career roadblocks so you can achieve more impact, income, and influence. Today is certainly the focus, particularly in the interview. And today we have a wonderful guest that's joining us to talk about how do you know that you have had a good interview. So if you come away from an interview scratching your head, not quite sure how it went, or worse yet, beating yourself up because, I should have said this or I should have said that. And we've all been there. Interviews can be very stressful, particularly virtual interviews. Being faced with a camera, maybe are you showing your best self? We're not sure. And worse yet, it's super hard to get feedback from a lot of recruiters or internal talent development folks. So how do you know whether you did well? Are you getting crickets? Do you hear nothing back? Well, Tim is going to share with you the top tactics and strategies to make sure you show up as your best self for those high-profile roles and any other roles, and prepare yourself to shine and interview with impact. Now, as you are tuning into the Career Coffee Chat show, please say hi, say where you're from, say your name. I'd love to welcome you in. So come on in and join us for a great conversation. We are happy to answer your questions, so don't be shy. If you're watching or listening to the podcast later, give us a like, a thumbs up, or a star rating, because your feedback matters to us. Now, as we're opening the show today, I want to make sure that you know who this awesome guest is. Tim Madden is a veteran headhunter and has led teams that have placed over 8,000 professionals. That figure is a lot higher now. In over 21 industries, he's worked with the largest Fortune 500 recruitment firm in the world and is responsible for over $50 million of placements for executives. So if you're interested to learn what the key factors are that make or break an interview in competitive job markets, or if you want to learn how to make sure that you leave the right impression and make the connection when it matters most, you're in the right place. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce you to Tim. Hey, Tim. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Aaron. Thanks for having me.
Great. And I want to say hi to Jonathan, who's tuning in from Houston, Texas, and Tawny, who's also watching from Houston. Hope, great to see you from Tampa. So some folks there in your hometown, or near your hometown there, Tim, tuning in from Florida.
Yeah, I like to say I love Hope because of the warm weather, sunny beaches, and no state taxes. It's a great place to be.
Which one do you like most, Tim? Be honest.
The no state taxes. I talk to a lot of people and they're, either getting out of the military or maybe they don't want to live in their city anymore. And I'm like, hey, come to Florida. I mean, if you make $100K and you come from California, you're saving $13.7K a year. And if you're at multiple six figures, that's some huge savings where you could take another vacation savings. Yeah.
Absolutely. I want to say hi to Eric and Cornisha. Great to see you both tuning in today. Please don't be shy. We're here to answer your questions when it comes to interviewing for impact, because you've got a stellar guest today. And Tim, I'd love to learn a little bit more about, why, first of all, what got you into this? I know that you've been a very successful recruiter for years, and now you're focusing on helping people who are interested in a successful transition make it happen. So what drives you? What's that passion?
So the first thing I want to say is here's how I got into it. Way a long time ago, even though I look young, in my earlier military days, was my dad called me one day and he said, you know what, Tim, I think you need to be a recruiter. And I was like, what? Because I was in the military, I did a lot of different things. He's like, you need to be a recruiter and you can be stationed with me in Indianapolis. And I was like, sure. And that started my recruitment journey back in 2005. And fast forward, after I got out of the military, I went to, hey, this is what I was good at. So I transitioned to the corporate world. And then I transitioned to work at the world's largest company doing placements. And then actually I had my own firm for 5 years where we were really successful too. The reason why I like impacting lives through coaching now and what really drives me was when I was a recruiter or a headhunter or owned an agency, it was always just about you find 5 people, You send 5 to whoever that decision maker is. You think they should hire Carol. They never do, right? They hire someone else. And at the end of the day, one person gets hired and 4 people don't. And it was very discouraging. So when I owned an agent, we would get contracts that would pay. Headhunters get paid well, guys. And things were going well. But at the end of the day, I remember one year we placed like 300 people. And then I thought, but there's 1,200 that didn't get placed. Yeah. That were great talent, but maybe they just needed some help branding themselves. Maybe they needed to navigate the interview a little differently, which is what we're talking about today. And I said, you know what? I want to start an organization where I can help those people. And since then, the quality of my life and everything has been up tremendously because I'm very passionate about what I do. And I like seeing people have
Tim a thumbs up or give him a clap. Let's cheer for Tim because this is tremendous. Shifting and seeing that need. And then I'm sure I feel the same way as a coach. It's just much more rewarding to help people thrive and flourish in their potential. And Hope said, she says, that's a great benefit. We choose here when my soldier retired out of the Army.
Yeah,
in Florida. Absolutely. She's talking about being in Florida. And Jesse says, hey, it was hot and humid. Hello from Fulshire.
If I wasn't in Tampa, or if I wasn't in Florida, Jesse, I'd be in Texas. Absolutely. But one of the things is in this role, before when you would close a deal as a headhunter, you would get a big monetary check, right? And you say, wow, you just made a lot of money. But now we've had just the tremendous stories, which will tearjerk you. For instance, let me just share one with you. There was someone I worked with. This is typically we work with people in the United States, but we do work with people abroad too. This individual just transferred from Nicaragua that sought political asylum. This was a CFO, and he landed in Miami. Guys, he hardly spoke English, right? And he had the skills, he had the know-how and the knowledge.
Right.
But fast forward to his journey, and now we got him a senior level role in Bank of America. I remember when he called me, just like saying, teared up, I never thought this was going to happen. Now they're relocating me. I got the salary that I wanted. I mean, that's what I do this for. Right? Is to hear these stories, these impactful stories of people truly transforming their career. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah, that's why I do what I do too. It's because there's nothing like it. Opening up the opportunities, allowing people to shine. So Jonathan's popped a question in here too, but I want to poll everybody else that's either tuning in actively or quietly and silently in the background. What are your top questions or struggles when it comes to the interview? Because we're here to help you. So Jonathan's mentioned, we're getting right into this, Tim. He said it's very difficult for him to pass a second round of interviews.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about that. What's the difference between first round and second round interviews? But Tim, for you, what's the most crucial first thing that someone needs to do when it comes to interviewing for impact?
Great question. The first is you have to have framework, which is what we're going to share with you today. Okay. Because I'm a military guy, right? So here's the analogy I give to people. Imagine being dropped into combat where you don't know how to fire your rifle. You don't know how to reload. It's not sighted and you don't know how to call for help. How many people would like to do that? Right? No. Think about this. And Jonathan, I'm not sure, or Jesse or Hope or Eric, I'm not sure what you guys do, right? But if you're in marketing, you have framework of a successful product launch, right? If you're operations, hey, if we're having turnover, here's the framework I need to do. So every professional watching this podcast has framework for how to be successful in their industry. Right. You just need the framework for how to be successful at this, which I'm so glad that you're tuning in because we're going to share it with you. You ready to get started?
Yeah, let's dive in.
Perfect. I got 7 steps for you. I can't not tell you which ones are more important than others because they're all vital in interviewing with impact. The first thing I want to encourage you to ponder is there was a study done on LinkedIn maybe about 3 years ago where they polled 5,000 executives. They asked these executives 2 questions. What % of the time do you know if you want to hire someone in 60 seconds? 70% of those people said, hey, when I meet someone within 60 seconds, I can generally tell 70% of the time if I'd like to bring them on board. That same study said, what about 15 minutes? Guys, 90% of people said, I pretty much can make a hiring decision in 15 minutes. So the first thing I want to say is, think about, regardless of if you're there, because I know a lot of people have said this before. Let me know in the chat if you've said this. Hey, Aaron, I went on an interview. It was only supposed to be 30 minutes, but it went an hour or an hour and a half, right? I would really encourage you to think about what's happening in that first 15 minutes. Now, what's going to happen first is the question that they're always going to ask you, what's coming? Hey, tell me about yourself. So let's really break down this question, because this is really where you start. And this is a pinnacle moment in the conversation is at the beginning. Now, I'm going to make a little joke here, right? What you need to think about is the first words that you're going to communicate are so important. Just as important as most of us were in college, right? And maybe you're that guy or gal who thinks someone's cute at the bar, right? So maybe you're going to go buy them a drink, and the first things you say, what's going to happen? They're going to either say, hey, Tim, get away from me, or hey, let's keep talking. Guys, it's the guys and gals, it's the same way in the interview. So you have to have a good pitch. You can probably do, a Google search to talk about, hey, how can I prepare myself there? We won't go through the whole aspect right now, but what I want to share with you is this. Tell me about yourself should really be worded to tell me why you're excited about our company, or tell me why you're a right fit. And I really love this story. I was at Chipotle a couple years ago, and an interviewer was there. And I know this is just to work behind there, making the burritos and stuff. But the hiring manager literally asked her, I was eating. She said, tell me about yourself. She said, my name's, Carrie. I live in Lakeland. I like doing this. And I love food. I love making food ever since I was young. My mom, and I'm telling you, it's the same thing, right? So if you're in operations, you need to say, over the past 20 years, what are they looking for, right? In that Chipotle case, they're looking for someone who can show up on time and who can do what they need to do and make good food, right? If they're looking for an ops person, it should say, hey, over the past 20 years, I've led teams of up to this, and I specialize in these things that are related to what they're looking for. Right.
And they give it away in the job description. So this is one of the things that I do, Tim, and it may be similar preparation steps so you do with your clients too. You leverage the job description. Of course, you do diligence, learn about the company, see if you have shared connections, find out about them. But for those first interviews, really, it's exploring and making sure that you shine. And you can leverage the job description to do that. So they'll tell you what probably their top 2 to 3 focus areas are, what they're looking for. Speak to that. What contributions can you talk about? Not just, I'm familiar with digital marketing. No, don't leave the money on the table with that. Let's talk about what you've done and how it matters.
And hey, the past is a good prediction of the future. So thank you for bringing up the digital marketing analogy. Hey, my name's Tim Madden, and over the past 15 years, I've specialized in digital marketing, where I have spent over $5 million in advertising funds in Facebook. I've done this many campaigns, and here's how successful they've been. And if you're looking for someone to scale your Facebook or whatever, I'm really excited to talk to you today. That's going to capture someone's attention, right? If you're a CEO and right away you're sitting there and a guy walks in, has presence, is confident, has had a successful track record, and is able to relay that, you're already positioning yourself in a very good spot. Because remember, you got 60 seconds.
Right.
You don't have very long. How can you capture their attention?
What's your UVB? What's your unique value proposition? Can you articulate that? So incredibly important.
In the last part of my little opening pitch, I always want to say, basically, here's why I'm qualified. Here's my value. And I also want to talk about, why I'm excited to talk to you today. Hey, and I'm really excited to talk to you today because I noticed you guys were doing XYZ in the industry, and that's what I'm passionate about too. Or you got to find some type of common ground.
Right. Or your industry or your company focuses on automation. I love automation. I do these things personal. It's like, can you tie your personal life into the conversation too, because it's not just what you do professionally, while extremely important. It's who you are. Are you bringing your whole self into that conversation?
Yeah.
Right? If you could say, oh, this company, take for example, the MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston, Texas, big employer, and my mother had cancer, and MD Anderson helped her, survive that, and it means a lot to me. Can you bring yourself into that conversation?
Absolutely. I'm glad you said that. We had someone interview previously, a company in Minnesota. They specialize in medical products too, right? And one of their family members was in a car accident, and that product actually they're using it now. So they relayed that story of just, hey, I know I'm very passionate about this because of this reason. Guys, if you can start off the conversation letting someone know, hey, I'm confident, I'm qualified, and I'm passionate, you have set the tone for the whole interview.
Right. Yeah.
If you don't do this correctly and you haven't practiced and you don't know what to say, you just ensure that the rest of this is probably not going to go as well as it could.
Right. And their impression's already made. It's true. I mean, research has studied humans' impressions. What that first initial impression is so incredibly important, sets the tone for the rest of the interview. If they've decided in the first 30 to 60 seconds that, oh, they don't have this, or maybe they're not a good fit, or they don't, they're not coming off right, it's downhill from there.
Yeah.
So it's important to come in strong, particularly if you've done your due diligence. Let's just say that you did the smart thing and you saw who you also in your connections that might work there, and you followed that up, and you talked to Sue, who actually works there, and Sue said, oh yeah, so-and-so, your potential hiring manager, what's really important to that person is this, and you didn't bring that into the conversation?
Not good. Yeah, it's the same, back to the first impression. I know we could sit here and talk a lot about how important that is. It's so paramount. Even in the military, if you're a previous military veteran or still serving, if you watch this, we write heavily on how does the soldier look in uniform and their fitness. And I can tell you, if you're on base and you're a senior leader, if you notice someone who is not meeting height and weight standards, or their uniform's all wrinkly, at the end of the day, you could be the best soldier on that base. They've already made that determination of this person's not qualified. They don't care about the uniform. And it's so hard to turn that around, right? So if your pitch is like not good at the front, it's so hard to turn it around later because they already kind of planted that seed.
Yeah. So Jonathan shares, he says, so when I think about the tell me about yourself question, it's more like telling me who you are and linking it to the position, basically selling yourself as an ideal candidate. Jonathan, is what you're doing, rather than a summary of your resume.
Yeah.
Please don't summarize your resume.
Absolutely.
That is an interview killer. I cannot stress that enough. Some interview killers is summarizing resume, not clarifying questions if you're not sure, because oftentimes there's open-ended questions asked. Even the tell me about yourself, sometimes I would encourage that you say, would you like to know more about me professionally or personally? And then just weave that whole pitch into it, whether it's professional or personal. If they want to know something personal, then maybe you can lead with personal and then weave it just depends on which one you put first, right?
Yeah.
So you're still pitching.
Jonathan, a good framework is this for the pitch. The way I break it down is three things. First is about me, but here's the thing about me. I keep it super short. So, hey, Mohammed, welcome to the podcast today. So what we do is this. At the very beginning, hey, my name's Tim Madden. I live in Tampa. I've been a military veteran for 20 years. I'm a graduate of this. That's number one. So I do introduce myself like personally, but I do it really short because, guys, why are we on this interview, right? It's to tell them why we're qualified. Then I go into linking, just like you said, my background and how it's relevant here and how I've been successful. And then part three, Jonathan, would be why are you excited to talk to them and try to find some type of call?
Right. Why that company? Because here's the deal. They can hire anybody. Passion. It's interesting. When I talk to hiring managers, let me know if this is true for you, Tim, as well. Well, from what you see, they would be more likely to hire someone less qualified that shows up more energetically.
Absolutely. There's a best-selling book called Hiring on Attitude, right? Yeah.
matters tremendously. Hi, Gerald. Want to welcome you to the show. He says, I'm passionate about my wife, children, and music. Do you have another word that I can convey in a similar connotation, but that I can say with more honesty?
Yeah, no, this
That's
is
great.
okay to open yourself of like they don't know you. Hey, my name's Gerald. I live in Houston, Texas. And hey, in my free time, I love spending time with my wife and child. We typically go fishing on the weekends. I'm an avid music lover. But today, what I really wanted to talk to you about was over the past 15 years, I've been very successful. And then go right into it, right? You notice you just gave them a little bit of, hey, this is who I am as a person. Now let me move into professionally. I think that's totally fine because, yeah, it's totally fine. So moving on to the next one. This is very important.
A lot of time here.
Yeah, this is really important, okay, as well, just like all of them are. But this is the main reason you are on the interview, okay? The only reason you are on this interview is because they have an opening. They need someone to do something, right? And number two, they probably have challenges, okay? Which is why they're trying to hire someone, because it could be a newly created position or it could be they're doing a backfill. What you really need to do, despite the job description, because sometimes it's different, you need to be asking the question, hey, I read the job description, if you were able to, right? If you got provided a copy, hey, I read the job description. I have a pretty good understanding of what you're looking for. But can you tell me what's important to you? Can you tell me the top three, priorities that you're looking to accomplish in? A variation of however familiar it comes from you of the census is what are you really looking for?
Right. Get a firm idea of expectations.
Exactly. Because here's the thing. You could look at the 10-page job description. It could only be like 2 to 4 things that they really need help in this area. Here's how that helps you. If you really know they need help in A, B, and C, that's where I'm spending most of my time on the interview. And I'm going to let them know how I've done A, B, and C through the STAR method, storytelling. It's called a lot of different things, but it's a good framework for how do I show my value in relation to what they're looking for. So you really need to focus on that criteria of what are you looking for? Let me tell you how I've done that successfully at previous roles.
Right.
You have to do the same exact thing for the challenges part. Hey, what are some of the key challenges in the organization in regards to marketing or the business unit? I'm sure they're going to tell you. Then share with them, right, how you solve similar challenges in different areas. If you start with a decent pitch, you get to what they're looking for and the challenges, and you've told them you've done this successfully, hey, you have positioned yourself in a very good way.
Very strong. Absolutely. Yeah. It's an art form. A lot of people feel like they have to, an interview is some sort of interrogation. It's not, it starts with I, but it's a different thing. Okay. It's a conversation, not an interrogation. And it's a participant, it's two-way. So you are also expected to participate. And please don't wait to ask your questions until the end, because a lot of times people are busy, they have back-to-back meetings, and they don't always allow enough time for you. If you're like, it's a 30-minute call and it's 9:29 and you're getting ready to go, 1 minute, they're not going to want you to ask 5 minutes worth of questions.
Yeah.
So ask it early on. And another way to kind of encapsulate this is maybe, what are you looking for this position to tackle in the first 60, 90 days? What's the top priority for you? And that gives you an idea. Another one that I like to take the temperature of what you can expect from the culture is to the hiring manager, which might be the second round interviews, depending on how they structure it. What is important to you? What exemplifies excellence for this role to you? So what tells you that this role is actually, someone in this role is doing a great job, basically? And we want to ask that of the hiring manager, because based on what they tell you, it will share a lot of good information about what their expectations are.
Yeah. The other big one is, if you have one of these interviews, let me give you just another tip. Some interviews, after you present your opening pitch, right, they're going to start hitting you with all of these behavioral questions, right, which is, hey, tell me about a time you had dealt with a disgruntled client or remember, you have 15 minutes to leave a lasting impression. So if they start with a question, what I want you to do is after you answer it, okay, I just answered the question. I'm going right into, hey, I do have a question too. What are you really looking for, right? Just get to that as quickly as possible. Right. Because remember, they're going to make a hiring decision very quickly on if they're going to decide to move you further. I don't want to worry about a bunch of behavioral questions that they're asking everyone when really they're looking for someone to...
All their pain. They've got a problem. I mean, positions solve problems. We're all problem solvers. We all are. So a position is created to solve a problem or do something. Risk is avoided or revenue happens, basically. So what does that look like for them? Yeah. So that's a great tip, Tim. To get to that right away, you can say, do you mind if I ask you a question? It's very important to me. And I'm sure it's important to you, or what have you. Make sure that you're not like, stop the press,
Yeah. The biggest part too is how you're answering these questions when they tell you, I'm looking for someone to do these things, or these are some of my challenges. So it's kind of a 4-step one for me. Step 1 would be context. What I mean about context is I want to let them know, say it's turnover, right? Say they're having an issue. They need someone to reduce turnover. Step 1, context. I'm going to let them know, hey, let me paint a picture for you, right? When I was working at this company, here's what we were doing. Here's what I was in charge of. This is just storytelling 101, right? I want to let them know what frame, because a lot of people will just go right into how they can help them and they miss a lot of key components. So the first thing I want to do is give them context or perspective. I want to let them know I was here and I had, number 2, I had a similar problem, which was affecting these areas. Number 3, let me tell you now exactly what I did. And number 4, what the results were. See, if you use that framework, you won't miss anything. Maybe put it on your little laptop or have your notes below. Because if you follow, if you let them know I was working here, I had a similar challenge, here's the steps I took to solve or implement whatever. And number 4, we were able to reduce turnover by this %. That's the flow you need to have, and it's very easy to understand for the audience interviewing you. It's very key.
Right. And by the way, when you're sharing an actual experience, which is important, very important to share an actual experience whenever possible, you show up differently. You as the individual typically are more engaging, look more approachable, and connect more easily when you're sharing an experiential situation versus well, what I would do, general answer. Please don't do that.
Let me show you how I've already done it successfully at these organizations.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And please chime in if anybody has any questions. For those of you who are just hopped on, we are here to answer your questions. So I asked earlier, what's your top challenging interview questions, or do you have a scenario that you'd like us to walk through with you? Because we're here to help.
And some of the biggest mistakes I see, I work with directors, VPs, and executives around the country and abroad. They will ask these questions, what are you really looking for? And they'll completely omit saying anything and move on to the next thing, which is such a missed opportunity. Yeah. Or the decision maker, hiring manager, CEO will say they need 3 things. Erin will handle one well, and then she'll move on to the next thing, completely omitting. This happens all of the time when I prep very successful leaders in business. So this is very important that you tackle each of these individually.
Right. And if time is of the essence, you need to deliver information very quickly, use what I call the golden nugget approach. So you'll actually address all 3 within a very short time frame. Well, yes, I've actually experienced this at this company. We're very successful in handling that. In this situation, I was doing this. In this situation, I was doing that. Would you like to know more about that? If you're under a time crunch and you know that perhaps for whatever reason, you don't feel like you have a lot of bandwidth to just dive into a story and the next story. Because some people feel like, oh, I have to get all this information out really quickly. And that stops you from rushing what you have to say, because I do know that some people under stress will talk really fast. So we're trying to come across natural and confident and calm. So by doing that golden nugget, you tell them that, yes, I'm relevant in all these three areas. And then you can do the choose your own adventure. Which one would you like to learn more about first?
Mm-hmm.
So they're engaging in that.
So Eric had asked, Aaron, do you have any tips for how to answer the what's your biggest weakness question? I think I have a way that we can just put a Tim Madden stamp of approval for. You can always say this. Okay. So Eric, a way I would explain this, right, is that's a great question. Hey, Tim, what's your biggest weakness? Great question. I've had many weaknesses throughout my career of being in business. There were times I had weaknesses in leadership, weaknesses in counseling and mentoring, weaknesses in this and this. But here's what I can tell you that I believe to be true for anyone who's successful. The reason I think I've been able to be so successful is right when I notice a deficiency in my area, in my domain, right? There's tremendous amounts of knowledge and books out there. So I've read books on leadership by this person. I've read books on mentoring and coaching by this person, right? So every time I see myself with an area to improve, I try to handle it as soon as possible, right? And that's the kind of employee that you're going to be hiring when you bring me on board is if we do have challenges, et cetera, in the future, I'm going to be the one that's going to figure it out quickly.
Right. And don't be afraid to share that you're open to feedback because you're aware that no one is perfect and there's always room to grow. And when you're coming to it with a growth mindset versus being afraid of, oh, well, I'm not supposed to have a weakness. That's not the point. That's not what they're looking for. What they are looking for is that you acknowledge that there's something you can improve on and that you've worked on that thing and then you're open to feedback and always willing to improve that something's important to you. That's what they want.
And Eric, I like to use humor all the time. I know a lot of people don't because they get so tense in the interviews, right? So I'd probably wrap that up with, surely, Aaron, you don't want to bring someone on who just has a bunch of weaknesses and hasn't tried to develop some type of strategy to make those stronger. Would you agree? Yes. Yeah. I'm really glad to be talking to you then.
Yeah. I really like the chocolate one, though, if I feel comfortable. Enough with the individuals, because some people are just as nervous as you. Keep that in mind. Yep. So when I get that question, I'll be like, well, my biggest weakness is chocolate, and I'm really trying to quit. I'm just kidding. No, real seriously here. And then I get back to it, and that gives them a little bit of levity, and the rest of the interview goes much more smoothly.
The other thing, too, is I know Gerald had a question first. Gerald, absolutely. I try to use, when I'm using that storytelling framework, I want people to know where I work. And say you get a behavioral question of having to let someone go, right? Saying that person was Aaron and sharing where Aaron's at and what you tried to do and these things, absolutely. And you want to be giving statistics, names, not confidential information, of course, right? But it makes the story more impactful, more relevant, and it engaged that user a little more because when we can say it was Pam who you helped or whatever, a Fortune 500 client that you solved a big problem for, it's going to add a tremendous amount more value to the audience. Yeah.
Specificity. I can't say that. Specifics. I was going to say something fancy and it didn't come out right. Did you notice that? Don't do that in the interview. Keep it simple. Don't try to bring the dictionary to the interview. So, Tim, what do you have next for us? Because
we got three more. The next one is objections inside the interview, which is actually, I just did a whole hour-long podcast on this, guys. It's the Executive Career Podcast on Apple, where I talk about how to overcome these because you're going to get objections in the interview. I know you're thinking it's just you, but I'll tell you, every single person who goes on an interview is going to get criticism on something about their career. Let me just give you one example. I've worked with many people who've worked at the same company for 25 years that literally it's going to be taken negatively in the interview. Even though they've been promoted 8 times at that company, they're going to say, why did you stay there so long? It's a bad thing.
It's bizarre.
On the flip side, you got the person who's 2 to 5 years throughout their career, took promotions. They're going to ask them, well, why do you keep leaving? So let me be the first to say it's always coming. Certification and education is always coming. Okay. I have this whole list. I won't bring it all up. Location, all of these things are going to be brought up in the interview.
I noticed a gap here in your career history.
Exactly.
If you'd like to.
Yeah. The important thing is you need framework for how to handle these, and you have to practice. Most of the times when we prep our candidates or our clients, right, for interviews, we ask them, let's identify these roadblocks that were probably going to come up. This job description says MBA. You don't have it, but you've had a successful career. Let's tackle that. Let's tackle this gap, right? So the first thing is you have to have a plan of what am I going to say? Here's what I found to be really successful. It's just a sales framework, okay? Number one, regardless of what they hit you with, agreement is key. Hey, let's use the MBA one, right? You don't have your MBA. Number one, hey, I completely agree with you, Aaron. I absolutely do not have my MBA. Number two, I can understand why you want someone who has that education criteria as well.
Agreement and understanding.
Agreement and understand. Number three, now tell them why it's not a big deal. Okay, so jokingly, right? But hey, I completely agree why you want some of this. I completely understand why you feel or think that way. And number three, now we have to handle it. Lead with your accomplishments and your achievements.
Yes.
So there's two ways to handle it. If you're bold and you're confident, you could handle it this way. Hey, if you're looking for someone who has an MBA, I'll be the first to tell you that's absolutely not me. If, though, Aaron, you're looking for someone who has a 20-year successful track record, who has reduced turnover. You remember now I'm going back to what they said was important to them, right? Yeah. If you're looking for someone who's reduced turnover by 30%, increased P&L by 10% year over year in this, that's something that I've done successfully for the past 20 years. Isn't that what you're really looking for?
You want them to agree with you. That's why he asked as a question. Because when they say, then they hear that their brain hears themselves say, yes, that is what they're looking for. They're basically saying, yes, you're a good candidate to their brain. It's brilliant. Little NLP there, neuro-linguistics programming. But it is a very successful tactic. So yes, you're right. I don't have an MBA. I can understand why you want that. And no buts, no however, no regardless. And don't you want someone who is able to bring X, Y, and Z to the table?
Yeah.
We want to be conscious about using the word if, but, however, and is a good one and not a but. But Gerald asked a really good question here, Tim. He said,
great question.
Overqualified objection. And a lot of
I'm glad you brought this up
now,
because this was another way to handle. So you just saw me use like a bold, confident approach, overload them with your just successful career. But this is a case where you have to get to the root cause of why they said that. This is so important because you can't handle that objection. You can't. What are you going to say, right? There's literally nothing that you can say. What prompted them to say that is what you need to think about. Because let me give you this analogy because this is so important for you, Gerald. Imagine you're probably a father, right? Maybe you have children. Imagine your kid running up to you, crying. Are you going to pick up your child and say, don't worry, little one, everything's going to be just okay? No, that'd be super weird, right? That's what you're doing if you try to handle some objections too soon without knowing what the problem was. The first thing that you're going to tell the kid is, hey, honey, what's wrong? What happened? Why are you feeling this way? So, framework, we're going to add another step when you deal with these. Hey, I completely agree, because that's so important all the time. Hey, I completely agree with you. I probably am overqualified. I understand why you feel this way as well. Why do you feel I'm overqualified? You got to ask that question. Because now we figure out maybe it's your education, maybe it's just length in years. Like either way, we don't know what the issue is. For instance, let me use one that's a little different. Sometimes when you come from big or small companies, that'll be, how do you handle that? I came from a big company. We're a small company. We don't have a lot of money. We don't, whatever
Right.
the
You
case.
came from a multinational company.
You
Why
can't
would you
handle
go
it.
work for a small company? There's a whole host of different objections. We do get the overqualified objection, and you're right. Getting to root cause is so important because otherwise you can't address it. And it's important also to, this is what I'm hearing more often now too from a lot of experienced professionals. They're not necessarily wanting to continue to move up the ladder. They're like, hey, I found my passionate sweet spot and this is where I want to stay. And that might be a step down or maybe just a, horizontal move. They're not really shifting up. They're just kind of shifting to the side. And some people are like, well, why don't you want to move up? Because the cultural expectation is you must move up the ladder. Well, not everybody wants to. So with that being said, how can you handle that? Show up with your passion. Yes, you're right. I agree that I can see how you could say that. You may not want to say, I understand why you, because that's been negating why you want a root cause, but I could see where you would say that. I am very passionate about this area, but I'd love to know more from your perspective. What are you seeing?
Yeah.
Joe,
about it. Go back to your situation as overqualified. Let's think about all the reasons that would prompt them to that. Maybe you have your MBA, the position doesn't require it. So they're like, oh, he's got his MBA. Or think about this. Maybe you worked at a very large, successful company and they're a mid-sized company. So they're like, hey, he came from IBM. We're this. And think about the other 10 things it could be. See how we can't handle or even try to begin to handle unless we know, is it because of my companies? Is it because of my education? Is it because of my previous job type? What is it, right? But the good news is this. Once you have the specific root cause, it's typically a lot easier to handle.
Absolutely. Hope shared something here. Let me make sure I can get all this right here. She said the majority of her experiences is working in a church. So I have an MBA in biblical studies. I had a director level position and tons of experience in an environment where women are rarely accepted in these roles. But I can see this shift occasionally in the interview because of the religious environment. How do I overcome this? She said, I've been referring to it as a working in the nonprofit sector when I can. So what it sounds like, Hope, is what you're saying is some people have a bias against experience in a religious sector, even though you held a very senior level role in a challenging environment where women weren't typically accepted. So Tim, this is a challenging one. You want to tackle this?
Absolutely. What this is going to stem from originally, Hope, is probably what your LinkedIn profile or what your resume reads. Follow me for a sec. Now, I know you work at a church, however, or some type of entity, right? But think about this. It's no different than the people I work with that have been in retail for 20 years that don't want to be in retail anymore, right? Mm-hmm. I can't put retail and retail terms all throughout their resume. That's going to confuse people, right? So I would urge you to say, look at your documents that you have. Is it saying a bunch of stuff about the religious environment, or is it talking about the impact that you made there? Because maybe they're looking at it, and of course it says church, but maybe it says lead religious functions, lead youth pasture. Maybe we can just change those words around so they're not getting an imprint.
Right. Instead of
exactly
youth programs, your youth religious leadership program, you can say leadership programs.
Exactly.
Religion. So in other words, and this is exactly what I do with my clients too, because it's very important that you are aligning your content based on where you want to go, not just where you've been. Because the reader in LinkedIn, they need to see that connection. We need to make that obvious for them and speak their language based on where you're going. And it's not that we're dishonoring our past. It's like, oh, I don't have anything to do with that. But it's how we're framing that. So when they read it, they go, oh, I know exactly what she did. She's led these major initiatives. Doesn't matter who it was for.
It's just, I work with a lot of military veterans too. So what happens when they get out of the military? They're doing something now completely different and their resume reads military. And they're like, I'm not looking for someone in the military. I'm looking for someone who can sell software products. So I would say initially your resume needs to highlight your accomplishments and achievements relative to what you're targeting So it makes sense. But if you just keep if your documents are branded someone who's been successful here, it's not going to resonate with a lot of people. And they're still going to use that bias because that's what they're reading. But the good news is this. That's where we can change it because we control what goes on that paper. We control what goes on our profile.
Right. No one has a microscope into your past life unless you're interviewing someone you used to work with. They just don't. So you have a much more control over your content.
But here's the good thing too. You're still getting on interviews. So think about this, Hope. Think about this. Regardless of the document that you have where we said there could be some changes here and there, they're still bringing you to the interview. Okay? Yeah. So there's something there. So here's another thing, what sometimes a lot of people don't like to hear, but Tim Madden's going to keep it real with you. Sometimes when we don't hear back from interviews or stuff falls through, right? We typically look for something to blame. Mm-hmm. Okay. And here's the first thing, age with the people I deal with, or it's in my education. It's my career move. Let me be the first to tell you, there is nothing wrong with any of you. What likely happened, your pitch maybe wasn't that good. You didn't get to the root of what they're really looking for. You didn't tell them and express them those things. You didn't figure out their challenges. You didn't handle the objections well. Because guys, that's a good thing, which is step 2 of objections. If they give you an objection, they're giving you an opportunity to handle why and to try to prove them wrong. So
yeah, absolutely.
When you get them. What's a bad thing is the hidden objections, which we'll spend 1 minute when interview's not going right. And it's because they've planted something in their head like you don't have their MBA. You have to draw those out. Here's one good way to do it. And you have to use the tone nearly perfectly. You're wrapping up the interview. There's something. Erin's interviewing me. She's like trying to get me off the phone. I'm not sure. Hey, Erin, it was a pleasure meeting with you today. Hey, is there anything in my background, right, that you wish maybe I had more experience in, or anything that you would feel of some reason why I wouldn't be a good fit here? And here's what you do. You just pause for a second. Hey, and if you can be honest with me, I promise I won't hold it against you. Just really sincerely telling them. Because guys, people don't like delivering bad news. People don't like telling you why you're not qualified. But here's the deal. The only chance you get to handle that is on the call or on the Zoom. That call hangs up. It's not going to be solved through an email.
Yep. No. Yeah. Absolutely not. Particularly written context held against them. If you create a safe space for them to share, it will mean a lot for me. If you don't mind sharing that with me, just know that this is a safe space, or whatever you feel like is the appropriate language for the scenario or the situation. But yeah, that's huge. Handle any hidden biases, reservations that they don't want to share, but it's very important. That is your only chance to do it. Thank you, Tim, for sharing that. That's huge.
Yeah. Jonathan, in your question, here's what I would do. I know that is very difficult to deal with for most organizations. If I was in a job search and I know I had some type of abnormal citizenship status, here's what I would do. I would focus on large organizations. Because I know Oracle, Salesforce, any big company, they do not care. And typically, smaller companies are not set up to do that. And most mid-sized companies, some are and some aren't. And it's always a pressing issue with the clients that I deal with. But I tell you what, I never have an issue at any Fortune 1000 company. So to just alleviate that, I would focus on those larger companies because it's extremely common.
Yeah, it is. And we're discussing, for those of you who may be tuning in to the podcast later or listening to this as auditory, we're discussing a migration status or a visa, which is very common. It comes up quite often. And you're absolutely right. Focusing on organizations that are more equipped to facilitate that and support you is so important. Just having that conversation up front is also, I think, a good idea. Tim, what are your thoughts about that?
Here's my thoughts, may be a little different just because of this reason. I want to get people to hire me first. Now we can move into salary because it goes hand in hand, because here's what I know. I want to get people to hire me first. Then I want to talk about trying to negotiate remote because I don't want to move to New York City. Trying to then bring up when they want to bring me an offer, hey, I want to be open and transparent now that I got a public intox charge 18 months ago. or a visa status. I want to get someone to hire me first, because if we do that too early on in the conversation, they're like, hey,
It shuts them down.
It shuts them down without you being able to go.
I was thinking as a recruiter, like the screening call, that kind of thing. So there's a third-party recruiter, somebody calling from Robert Half.
Yeah.
Just ask, maybe that. I'm not again, we want to get in front of people, truly. That's what we want. Mm-hmm. So if you're shooting for larger organizations, don't bother to have that conversation.
Yeah.
But if you're looking and it happens to be a smaller company, less than 500 people, it's up to you, right?
Hey, Aaron, I have just one question for you as we're wrapping up or whatever. One thing I didn't mention is my visa status. It's pending something. Would you consider bringing on someone who's had a successful track record, who can help you reduce turnover, who can help you with this, who can help you with this, who's solved similar challenges, who just has some other, however you want to word it right, who maybe just needs a little help getting something.
Sponsorship or what have you, right?
There you go. Make sure you say not just, oh, I'm on a visa. Make sure always lead with your value. Would you consider bringing out someone who can absolutely do this for you successfully, who has a proven track record in these areas, but they just migrated to the U.S. and they're still pending something?
And they just migrated to the U.S.
And they just migrated to the U.S.
And they just migrated to the U.S. And looking for sponsorship. That's an important question. It's very important because what we're doing is we've established a rapport and a relationship, and we want to leverage that to encourage a further conversation. So I'll take one more question. I really love all your participation. If you do have any other questions after we wrap up the show, put them in the comments or reach out directly to either one of us. We're happy to help. Okay, that's what we're here for. But Tawny mentioned, she goes asking for a hidden objection. She said, "Oh, it seems kind of awkward."
Absolutely.
You respond to it. Absolutely, you're right, Tawny. It is. And that's one reason Tim mentioned, getting that tone right is so important, creating that safe space so they feel like it's more of a candid conversation.
Or think about this, Tawny. Let's do a mindset shift. If there's a hidden objection, they're not going to call you back anyway. So, hey, let's take a swing at the bat. Maybe we'll hit the ball, right? I'd rather try when I know they're not going to, when I know there's something, right? And I just can't figure it out. You can just feel it.
Yeah.
Right. So remember, hey, it might be awkward, but I would at least absolutely go for it.
Yeah.
So I know we're running out of time. We won't have, here's what I want to do. I want to just quickly go over one more thing with you, Aaron.
Absolutely.
Salary gets a lot of people. I have a salary guide that I want to give you, Aaron, that literally goes through most of the pitfalls, and then can maybe figure it out how to provide some value to the people that tuned in today. We can talk about how we can do that.
If you have a link to that, or I can pop it on a document viewer and share a link in the comments, so that way everybody can grab that. Because we were talking before the show started about how it's so important for people to negotiate, and people are not. They're leaving money on the table. What we're finding is research has shown, factual, that companies are more willing to negotiate now than ever. In fact, one of my executive clients just yesterday mentioned that, well, I made an offer to somebody and they didn't take it. It's not an employer's market, it's an employee's market. So making sure that you can negotiate, and you can negotiate things like whether you work remote, but try to have a conversation. That's one thing Tim mentioned. I think that's brilliant. Try to have a conversation and talk to them. It's like, hey, can we have a short conversation about 15 minutes about your offer? I'd like to walk through this with you. And that's something that companies really should be doing, to be honest. But if you're talking to people one-on-one, if you do have some negotiation points, it's a lot easier to do that. Because oftentimes it's email slinging and people can build up assumptions in your head. Oh, they want another $15. What's the nerve? When it's for a really good reason, because that's industry norm for your level of experience, right? So that's something to keep in mind. Very important. Please don't leave money on the table. Please don't think you can't negotiate, because we know that a lot of people don't when they can. So please.
Yeah, I just sent you that link where people can basically access that. It'll help them out tremendously. What I want to do, because I know we have 3 minutes, if it's okay, is the most important part of wrapping up. Yeah. And I know we only have a little bit of time. Make sure the next step of the interview, and you try to get something on the calendar. So many times you're going to talk to a recruiter who's going to tell you this. You're great, Aaron. I think I'm going to move you forward, but I have to get a hold of the hiring manager and I don't know his schedule. Okay, there's many variations to handle this. But what I would say, Aaron, how many job recs are you working on right now? Oh, a bunch. How many people? Oh, 200. Hey,
250 people, right.
Can I put some time on your calendar next Friday in case I haven't heard anything? So one of the things that happens is you leave the interview, you're waiting for a call, you're waiting for something to happen, and you immediately go into that worst case possible scenario that no one's ever going to call me back. So I know we don't have time to go through the full-blown part of it, but try to do the best you can to get something on the calendar and set clear expectations. Be the leader that they need for their organization, right?
Right. Absolutely. That's a great tip and very important. Please don't say, so what are next steps? And you'll know it'll be typical, oh, well, we'll get back to you, blah, 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 blah. Be proactive. Get it on their calendar. Absolutely. That's a fantastic final tip, Tim. I appreciate you and I appreciate the value you have poured into us today. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, everyone. It was a pleasure being here. And Jolie, that same question you're asking is in that salary guide I just gave access to. It's very challenging when they want your salary in the app, when they ask you your salary right when you get off the phone. Mm-hmm. This guide will help you basically negotiate through that.
Right. Yeah, and I'll share that with everybody. I'll put it in the show notes so you can get access to that. Thank you so much, Tim. Thank you all for participating and sharing with us what your challenges are and being a part of this very fun value-add experience. I know you are all walking away with some serious tools that will arm you and give you the tactics you need to show up and interview for impact. Until next time, friends, keep elevating.
Thank you for tuning in on the Career Coffee Chat podcast. It's been a pleasure. Feel free to reach out to me. My email is coacheurban@gmail.com or tweet at coacheurban, Instagram coach.eurban, or reach out to my Facebook group, Elevate Your Career. I'd love to learn more about you, hear your insights, and what questions you have. You can find out more about me at coacheurban.com. And don't forget, please do reach out on LinkedIn. You can find me at Aaron Urban. Until next time, cheers. Here's to caffeinating your career.